بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت من الحكيم ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. نويت تعلم والتعليم وتذكر والتذكير ونفذ إيثار الاستفادة وحتى تمس بكتاب الله وسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم والدعاء إلى هدى ودلالة على خير ابتغاء وجه الله ومرضاته وقبله وثوابه سبحانه وتعالى. اللهم علمنا مما ينفعنا وينفعنا بما تعلمنا وزدنا من فضلك علما وتعليما إنك على كل شيء قدير. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Welcome everyone to our monthly gathering of Living Islam. أهلا وسهلا مرحبا. Just as a quick reminder of how we kind of do the Living Islam. The Living Islam is not any type of formal gathering. It's very informal. So there's nothing that has been previously prepared. There's no topic that will be discussed. There's no, this is not a Q&A session or anything like that. This is just an opportunity for people to come and discuss different things that may be on their mind in regards to Islam or living as a Muslim or whatever the case may be. So there is no format, and we often like to say that, you know, there's nothing off the table, so to speak. However, we just ask that any questions be asked with Islamic decorum, but other than that, this is an open forum. And so with that little spiel or introduction, however you want to put it, I'm going to quiet myself for the moment and kind of let the rest of the group lead the way. Let you guys kind of dictate how this evening's conversation may or may not go, because we can't just sit in each other's comfortable silence for the next 2 hours. But I do see, since no one has volunteered as of yet, I do see that it says that there was a question that was submitted. It says, I have a question about how a woman can obtain an Islamic divorce if her husband does not give consent. I have a legal divorce that will be finalized any day now, and I made sure that my lawyer included in the divorce petition that I return the portion of the mahar that my husband has paid me. I'd like to know what steps I need to take in order to have my marriage annulled Islamically so that I can move forward, inshallah. So the thing is that when it comes to the aspect of the Islamic legal divorce, the thing is that if the husband does not give his consent to the divorce, it's not a situation where it can just be, for example, that the wife just gives the mahar back, and that would constitute a divorce. So technically speaking, one of the more common ways that a woman might seek a divorce would be for her to do what's called a khula'. But again, it's going to be at the agreement of the husband. So a khula' is essentially a woman saying that I will give you some type of financial beneficial property or money in exchange for you agreeing to this divorce. And sometimes it can be just the mahar itself, the dowry itself, but it doesn't have to be the dowry. But a woman just giving the mahar to her husband does not constitute a divorce if he doesn't agree to the divorce. Now, the other recourse that a woman can take is that she can petition her particular situation to, in an Islamic state, you would be an Islamic judge, but in the case that we're in now in America, she can petition her case to local scholars or imams who will sometimes be willing to look at the situation and try to mediate the situation. And so if it does lead to a divorce, then it'll be a situation where they may talk to the husband to get him to agree to the divorce, or if there are mitigating circumstances that would entail an actual annulment of the marriage, then they may be willing to give a legal verdict that says that due to XYZ circumstances, we would say that this marriage can be annulled whether the husband agrees or not. But those are more or less the different options that a woman can use. But in general, the husband would need to agree to the divorce. There are situations where, for example, a woman could actually place in her marriage contract that she would have the right to divorce. However, that has to be placed in the contract at the time of the wedding. It can't be something that's retro fitted in unless, again, the husband agrees to it. And so these are all different types of situations. And so generally speaking, and particularly like in situations like this, it's best to consult with a local scholar or local imam, ideally one that that the husband respects and is willing to listen to try to come to a peaceful resolution. I see, Sarah, you had your hand up.
Yeah, that was my question. So thank you for taking the time. Um, like I've talked to a couple of other people over the past few weeks. My divorce is still, I've gotten what's called a default divorce, um, which basically I'm in the state of Washington, and so if you petition for a divorce legally, and if the other party doesn't respond with any kind of counter um, claim or anything like that, then you can get approved for a default divorce, which basically means he doesn't have to sign anything. I just say they say, he hasn't responded. They don't even have to notify him officially. Um, and I've talked to some people, some other Islamic, people that I'm close to here, and they've basically said what you said, which is that I would need to go and talk to a local imam or sheikh and then hopefully get them um to help me, approve it. But my the sticking point that I'm coming up with is that it sounds like it's customary that the imam or whoever it is going to try to contact my husband in order to get him to hopefully just grant the divorce, like, and agree to it, um, on whatever terms are initiated. And that is complicated because I have a no contact order for domestic violence. I got a protective order as part of the divorce. So he is not allowed to contact me at all, even via a third party. And I'm also not allowed to have someone contact him on my behalf. And so I'm thinking that I'm probably going to have to get my lawyer involved if it is that an imam is going to need to contact my husband. Um,
So, I don't necessarily want to, have you discuss anything that's personal on a public
mhm.
platform that you're not comfortable with. But from the things that you've said, it is possible, like if you were to go to, oftentimes it would be like a group of scholars, just so that you have multiple people looking at the situation, is that it is possible that if there was a situation of domestic violence and that's been established, and your life was considered to be in danger, that it is possible that they may come to a conclusion to actually just have the marriage be annulled. But it's one of those situations where the details of the situation have to be looked at to kind of see what is the best course of action Islamically to go about it.
Okay.
Is so that's why, like you said, others probably have said the same thing, is because it's one of those situations where it's not like it's not like a answer that you're gonna find in a fic book where it's just like,
Mhm.
oh,
Yeah,
this situation, okay. So it's one of those things where we really have to look at all the details of
yeah,
the situation to kind of figure out, okay, what is the best approach, because there's, these different nuances to it.
yeah. That's why I
Um,
came here today. I was like, I took classes. it must have been like 2021, I think was the last time I took a class with you. Um, I hadn't even taken my Shahada yet. And I said, you know what? If anybody knows anything, this will be a place to start. So I'm trying to get all my ducks in a row because it's been really complicated. And you know, I wish it weren't. I really wish that he were able to just, you know,
But
do the kind thing and see that it's not going to work out and grant me the divorce. But here we are. So
may Allah make it easy for you and grant you ease in the situation. I mean, one of the things that we can say is that no person is required or even recommended to keep themselves in a harmful situation. That is definitely something that you do not have to do. So anything that could possibly bring harm to you, you're not required to do that. And so, if there is a situation of, especially if it's physical violence or the like, it would be, you can almost say that, depending on the situation, you can almost even say that it would be obligation not to put oneself in that. But in terms of the situation of having a formal religious divorce, then again, some of the details would have to be looked at. And again, it may be a situation where the local scholars may actually say that based upon these different factors, that this marriage will just be annulled. But again, I'm not in a position to, give a position of that nature.
mhm,
And again, it's a situation. It's similar, like even with the American legal system, is that you have to have lawyers and others, look at the situation and try to say, okay, these are the viable options that can be in place. And so that's kind of the similar from the religious standpoint, is that generally speaking, in a marriage, the husband has the outright right to divorce. And like I said, a woman can possibly have her own outright right to divorce, but it would either have to be something that was placed in a contract initially, or that the husband would agree to later on, and so on and so forth. But again, there are other options, and the more common ones are the aspect of the khula, which there's some type of monetary incentive
mhm,
for the husband to agree to it, or that you can present your case to an Islamic body of scholars who look at the specifics and say, okay, this is what is the best approach to do. And it could be that they may agree that the marriage itself just should be annulled altogether, whether or not he consents or
mhm.
not. But that would take, because that's issuing a fatwa, a legal verdict on the matter, and that has to come from those who are qualified to issue such decisions.
Okay.
So again, we pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it easy and gives you the best of outcomes.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
No problem. So for those who may have just joined us, again, this is our our monthly Living Islam session. So I don't have anything prepared. So if you're waiting for me to kind of say something or whatever the case may be, you might be waiting a while. So, this is an open session, open discussion, and so anything that's on your mind, that is what this platform is for us to be able to have dialogue with one another, not based upon any type of specific topic or structure. So this is an informal conversation. So ahlan wa sahlan, welcome, and please feel free to contribute. And also, something else I just add in terms of like how the structure is that is not a situation where someone says something and that I have to be the only one responding or even the one to respond. So, if other people, if something comes up and other people want to respond, you don't even necessarily have to ask me, like, can I respond or anything like that. You can just unmute yourself and join the conversation. Not everyone at once.
Okay, since nobody asked, so I would ask something. So this is to do with my real life practical life. It's like because I'm a new Muslim, I'm not like living in the environment of Muslims. I do go to masjids, and I do have some friends who's Muslims, but they're all new to me, and also that some people like they are very nice. They're my close friends, but they all have their families. They're all Muslims. So my own life is all my family and my previous friends, the close friends. None of them are Muslims. So it's very hard for me to keep living in a Muslim way because of that. Do you have any suggestions?
Um, yeah, it's that is a common situation that occurs. There are actually different initiatives that are being started to help because as much as people say that, for example, that there are many people entering to Islam, the unfortunate situation is that you have almost as many people that leave Islam, and part of it is because they don't have that support, they don't have that social connection to people. And when they go to the masajid, they don't necessarily feel welcomed, or they just don't feel a connection with the people at the masjid. So the only suggestion that I can give is that, in particular for sisters, is that it I don't want, online does not necessarily have the same effect as in person, but it's kind of a situation where it can actually help, at least in the meantime, until a person can develop close relationships. But in particular for sisters, there's an organization called the Rabata, and they do many different activities for sisters specifically. And part of it is that they do have a focus on sisters who convert to Islam. And the way that they do it is that they try to make it as interactive as possible. So even, for example, they have actually certain chapters in certain states. So they may have different different programs that they do in different states around the country. So, for example, my wife, she used to be a part of the New Jersey chapter of Rabata. So they would have different in-person gatherings that they would do. And then certain times of the year, they would possibly have a retreat that sisters could attend. And then they do certain things that try to encourage the doing of good deeds. So they'll have, like, for example, different challenges, but they're encouraging challenges. So, for example, I don't know exactly, because I'm a man, but from what I did kind of glean from what my wife either informed me of or what I've seen of her, is that, for example, they may have like a salawat challenge, like, the sisters kind of like competing to see how many salawats on the Prophet Muhammad SAW that they can do. Or they may have tahajjud reflections where they encourage each other to get up for tahajjud, and then they have a whole program during tahajjud time for sisters to be involved in. So that would be my suggestion for sisters in particular, when you're not, because the thing is that everyone's not necessarily going to be able to move either. Like, I could just say, well, there's a active sisters group in such and such. Like, if you want to actually move to Michigan, I think is where Answer Tamara lives. I could say you can move to Michigan, and you can be right there in the Minnesota. Sorry, yeah. So you can move to Minnesota and be right there with Answer Tamara, but not everyone's going to be able to move to Minnesota or will want to move to very cold Minnesota. But that is a means where you'll have access to live people, even though it'll be from an internet perspective. And then sometimes what happens, like again, it's happened with my wife, is that if you end up possibly going to certain events or things like that, you may end up finding or seeing sisters that are actually a part of Rabata as well, that you may have only interacted with virtually, but now you're able to see them in person as well. So that would be my suggestion. And then other, seems like other sisters have put in different other aspects. So like Sylvia had mentioned that Project Lena is something else that Rabata does. And that there's a particular WhatsApp group. So maybe Sister Sylvia could share that as well, where they have different, seems like they have different activities. But from what I've seen, Rabata for sisters in particular is one of the more available and active communities, even though it's virtual. But again, they really try to help sisters, in particular sisters who are converts or reverts to Islam. MAS Reverts Reconnect out of New York. They have sisters group online and in person. Okay. So Abdul Rashid, he's mentioning another resource as well. I know NYU, because I forget, I believe you're in New Jersey. So if you ever go to New York, I wouldn't suggest it, but some people, they like New York. But if you ever go to New York, I know Imam Khalid Latif at NYU, they have a specific converts group. And even in that Converse group, what they will sometimes do is that they will actually try to match up people intentionally. So what they usually try to do is that they try to match up people based upon shared experiences. So for example, if a person is a person of Asian descent, then they'll try to match them up with another person of Asian descent that is coming from that same type of background and experience. So that's another resource that they have, particularly if a person's in the New York area around NYU. Many of you who know me already, I'm not a New Yorker. So that's just kind of like why I have my kind of like New York jokes and cracks and so on and so forth. I'm anything but a New Yorker.
Thank you very much to give me to suggest these resources. I will look into that. But I wanted to give you more detail how my life is difficult to be a Muslim, like among the people who's not Muslim. For example, I have a Canadian friends come to visit me. We're very close friends. But my friends are like a couple of them, okay? They are not Muslims. So I took them to New York City, but I cannot pray because they come to here for tourism. I couldn't just abandon my friends, like, because we only go for 1 day at a time. So I couldn't pray because I have to take them around it. So plus I have no idea where the masjid are in New York City. I usually walk because it's energy consuming, so I don't really have time to look for masjid. So that's the difficult. So secondly, what my friends eat are not Muslim food, are not Islamic halal food. So when being with them, I kind of not eating halal food. And also that when I go to visit my family in my country, which is China, it's very hard for me to wear hijab because nobody of there is wearing it. I will be looked very strangely And also my parents, they don't support me to join any of the religion group. And my dad even said it's terrorist group because he's innocent, ignorant. So it's very hard, to wear hijab in my country. So this is the scenario I feel very difficult with. Do you have any suggestion in that in this regarding this?
Yeah, it's one of those things. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he mentioned two things, like two statements of his that actually come to mind as you describe the difficulties, and they are difficulties. Like it's a very legitimate issue, a concern, and a difficulty that people face. There are two statements that the Prophet ﷺ had made that is in relation to the difficulties that you mentioned. One of them is that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he said that towards the end of time, that a person holding on to the religion is going to be like holding on to a burning amber. And what some of the scholars mention about that is that the aspect of a burning amber is that I don't know how many people are familiar with the aspect of a burning amber, is that if you were to have a burning amber that got on your skin, it's not only is it hot and burning, but it actually like sticks to the skin, so like it becomes even more of an issue and more painful and so on and so forth. So, but basically what the Prophet was saying is that towards the end of time, that a person trying to hold on to their Islamic identity and their Islamic practices is just going to be extremely difficult. That it's just going to be an extremely difficult situation for a person to try to hold on to religion. And the second statement that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ had mentioned that again came to mind is that he said that بدا الإسلام غريبا فسيراد غريبا فطوبى إلى غرباء. Is that he said that Islam started as something that is strange and it will return to be something that is strange. So give glad tidings to the stranger. And so the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he's indicating that Islam is and it will, be something that people will find to be strange. Is that people will not understand, why why is she wearing that scarf on her head, or why are the men wearing those dresses, and so on and so forth. But the Prophet ﷺ, he's informing of this, and so the advice that I can give is that no matter what our situations may be, meaning the difficulties that we may face, or the situations where we may not necessarily be able to fulfill what we want to fulfill in terms of the religion, is that don't allow for the shaitan to take you away from your relationship with Allah. Meaning that and I can give a story that I heard from one of our teachers, Habib Amar, when he was responding to someone. He mentioned the story of a man who was a part of a gang of bandits. So they were a gang of bandits who would go around robbing people. And so one of the times that they were going around robbing people, they had raided this caravan, and then after they had gotten all the loot and so on and so forth, they had gone to a secluded area and pitched a tent by a fire, and was beginning to count their loot, and then also they were fixing themselves something to eat. And so the leader of the gang, when the food was passed to him, he had said, no, I'm fasting today. And so the rest of the gang members were just kind of all like saying like, wait, what do you mean you're fasting? Like, you're the leader of us. Like, you're the one who is the mastermind of, this haram that we're doing. Like, we're bandits, we rob people. Like, what do you mean you're fasting? And so the leader of the gang had said, I don't want to cut off every rope that I have with Allah. Meaning that, yes, I'm a leader of a gang of bandits, but that doesn't mean that I have to cut every rope that I have between me and God. And so our teacher, he mentioned that, later on, that this same leader of this gang was seen in Mecca, and he was basically a changed man. And it was said, he said about himself is that, from the blessing of me holding on just to that, that small rope of me even being willing to fast, even though I was still steeped in the haram, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has, saved me at this point in my life. And so, and I'm paraphrasing the story. But, the whole basis of it is that even when we find ourselves in those difficult situations where we may not necessarily be able to live out the religion the way that we want to, or the way that we feel that we should, is that don't let go of the rope that you have with God. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's not created us to be perfect. Now, I'm not trying to condone, missing obligations or engaging in activities that may be impermissible. What I'm saying is that don't allow for those situations, if they occur, to cause you to cut off all of your connections to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because that's what the shaitan wants. The shaitan, he wants you to just say, oh, I can't do it all, so I'll just give it up. I can't do everything, so I'll just, stop everything. That's the shaitan. And so we strive our best to adhere to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has access to, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for help. But if we find ourselves in a situation where we are not capable of fulfilling everything that we may want to, or everything that we may know that we should, but we don't allow for that to be a means for us to sever all of our ties to Allah. So just as an example, that even if I'm in a situation where I possibly have missed the prayer times in their proper time, then even though it's not it's not the ideal situation, but if that is the case, then when I go home at night, then I just will make up all of those prayers. That, yes, the ideal situation is that I pray the prayers in their proper time once they come in. But the shaitan, he'll say that, oh, well, you didn't pray the prayers, so you might as well just give it up. And so that's where we say that, I'm not going to cut off all of my ropes. And so those prayers that I may have missed during the day, I'm just going to make those prayers up when I get home.
Yeah.
So on and so forth.
Agree.
So that would be my advice, is that not to, like, whatever our situation is, not to make it an all or nothing type of situation.
Yeah. I don't cut it all. I just feel it's not like Iman is not so strong as if I'm surrounded by the Muslim group. For example, during the Ramadan time, or during when I'm engaging with the masjid people. So, but I will never cut it all out. I will not.
And the thing is that is the reality. I mean, it's interesting. You keep reminding me of different statements that the Prophet ﷺ had actually said to his companions, because there's another hadith in which the companions have said to themselves that, basically, I'm a hypocrite. And so it was actually Abu Bakr and another of the companions, they had complained about being hypocrites. And so they went to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ complaining about this. And basically the reason why they're saying that they were hypocrites was that they were saying that when they were with the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, it was as if they were seeing hell and paradise in front of their eyes, and they were extremely conscious about God. But then they said that, but when we go to our families or we're interacting, with others throughout the day, we get distracted, and it's like we forget all of those things. And the Prophet ﷺ, he had informed them, he said that if you were able to keep that same amount of iman that you have when you're in front of me, the angels would actually come down and shake your hands in the streets. Meaning that amount of iman, that amount of strong a sense of certitude that they had when they were in the presence of the Messenger of Allah was just that. It was because they were in the presence of the Messenger of Allah. So that was, he was a source of iman. And so I say that to say is that, yes, we don't have the Prophet with us anymore. However, it's that when we're able to be around other Muslims, that is a source of iman. And so, yes, your iman will increase when you're around other Muslims. In even, for example, in the Shafi school, they say that even if a woman is not capable of praying in the masjid in congregation, is that in the Shafi school at least, it's recommended that women actually have their own congregational prayers if there are a group of women that are together, and also the aspect of, as you mentioned, during the month of Ramadan, praying in congregation, having the Eid prayers being prayed together, having the Friday Jummah prayer being prayed together, is that when Muslims gather together, that is a means of strengthening one's iman. And so what a person should strive to do is to strive to kind of store up as much iman, like if, like for example, to say iman was something physical, is that when you're in those gatherings, or even for example the scholars they mentioned, is that if you read the books of the righteous, that's another means of increasing your iman. Is that when you're in those situations where it's kind of like you're getting a boost in iman, it's like basically try to store up as much as you can during that time, so that those times when it's not as easy to hold on to your iman, you still have some reserves from those times. But yeah, the iman, it will fluctuate, and it's going to be based upon situations and people and so on and so forth.
Yeah, thank you.
I wanted to say, sister, that I really relate to what you're saying. I took my Shahada in 2021 and I was living in Portland, and then I immediately moved Portland, Oregon, and I immediately moved to the beach, um, to a town of about 5,000 people. And so there were probably like three Muslims like within 100 miles of me. Um, and it was really like, I think what everybody else said about the Rabata program and all of that, like even just I had some connections, like I had a WhatsApp group that I was in from the masjid that was in Portland where I had started. Um, and I had taken classes on through the Mecca Center here. Um, and anything that you can do to try to like reach out and create community so that at least there's a touchstone or something like that. And Ramadan can be really, really challenging. I was by myself, me and my cats in my apartment, like fasting, I was wearing the hijab because I felt comfortable with that. But again, there was maybe one person that I could have, I could break my fast with, and that person was like 2 or 3 hours away, driving. So it can be really, really powerful just to have those online communities, and even just, like I did some like video breaking of my fast. I have an accountability partner for, waking up and things like that, but none of them were close to me because um, I lived there for 3 years, out, you know, at the beach. And I've only just now, like a few months ago, moved back to the big city, to the Seattle area. And part of the reason that I did that move was because I wanted to be closer to Muslims, and to be able to create that community. Um, but I think it was really, really important for me to be intentional about creating that community. Um, and you mentioned about halal food and things like that. Um, you have to do your best. I eat halal at home, and I would go to the city about once a month, and I would buy I would go to every halal market in the city, and I would buy chicken, and I buy chicken, and I buy chicken, I buy chicken. I buy like 50 pounds of chicken, and then I just fill my freezer.
Wow.
Because that was all I could have. And then, when I would go out, I would just have fish,
Uh,
fish and
Just
vegetarian food. So,
how do you deal with your family and friends who are not Muslims?
my family, alhamdulillah, has been really, really supportive. And I know that I'm really lucky, for that. Um, and
That's
I've also had really supportive friends. But I know that that's not the case, for others. So,
Oh, I see. Yeah, I feel like all by myself. I don't think my iman is affected. My iman only get affected when I'm surrounded by people who are non-Muslims.
mhm.
Yeah.
And that would always, that's the case, as they say, birds of a flock. The Prophet ﷺ, he actually, you're bringing out all these different hadith. But this is why he's the marja, he is the point of return. Is that the Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned that amaru ala dini akhihi, that a person is on the way of life of their, he said akhihi, which is his brother, but you can say their close companion. And so meaning is that we feed off of each other. And so that's just human nature. Like I think even from a medical perspective, they say like if you put two, like if you were able to have two beating hearts next to each other, eventually those hearts will actually start beating in sync with one another. Like that's how much as human beings we kind of feed off of one another. And so, again, this is why the encouragement is actually as much as we can to be around other Muslims, but when we're around non-Muslims, whether it be family members or whether it be non-Muslim friends, is just to know that yes, they will have an effect upon us, but just trying to be a good example for them as best as possible, and also trying to feed off of the iman that we have within ourselves. With parents, I know different people, oftentimes, especially like in the New Muslim program, what we usually will tell people in regards to parents is to just take time with parents, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he's really emphasized the aspect of being good to one's parents. And so what I usually recommend for people is that I don't actually recommend for them necessarily to like upfrontly talk about religion with people, but especially with parents, what I do suggest is that however good your relationship was with your parents before becoming Muslim, as much as you can, try to make it like 10 times better. And the thing is that is actually the Islamic approach, is that your parents are actually supposed to be the ones who you give your ultimate best behavior to. Like when the Prophet ﷺ was asked, like, who is the most deserving of my good company? He said, your mother, and then your mother, and then your mother, then your father. So I usually encourage people to just like be overly good to their parents to the point where like your parents is like, what's gotten into you? Like why are you acting like this? And that's when you might can say, well, I love you, mom and dad, but also Islam encourages me to be good to my parents. And so this is why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can actually be a means for them to kind of have somewhat of a different look about Islam when they can see that Islam has actually caused you to become an even better daughter, for example, with them. It's not necessarily a guarantee, but it's something that can possibly help. And it has helped in, like, I know Usama Khanun, rahimahullah, he's passed away. Like, he's mentioned that he's received advice like that. The advice that he got was something more specific. One of the teachers that he had said to him, like, do you kiss your mother's hand? And Usama Khanun was saying, like, no, not usually. And so his teacher has told him, it's like, okay, anytime that you are going to leave your mother from now on, kiss her hand. And so, Usama started to do that. Like, every time that he was going to leave his mother, he would, kiss her hand. And his mother wasn't Muslim at this particular time. And so at first his mother was kind of like shocked that, he was trying to kiss her hand. But eventually he said that it got to the point where my mother actually just would hold her hand out and like would just be expecting, for him to kiss her hand. And so, but that helped to better his relationship with his mother as well.
Yes, I agree to to make a role model to become better when I treat my parents. But in reality, actually, I don't even call my parents anymore. Because I also in the same time I become a Muslim, I learned that my parents are narcissists. So the best way, according to my research, is not go no contact with a narcissist. I just maybe talked, like I feel guilty, but I cannot really talk to my parents all the time. So I just lower the frequency to once a month now. They may think I'm worse than before, but it's very hard. to deal with my parents.
Yeah, so the thing is that there are situations where it might be a situation where you may not communicate as frequently, but I would say what you can do to couple it is that even if it's going to be a situation where it's difficult or possibly harmful to directly communicate with your parents, what you can do is that if talking to them is not going to truly be feasible, then send them gifts and write them letters.
Oh,
And
okay.
this way, again, it's this aspect of goodness because, again, as we had mentioned earlier, no one is required from an Islamic standpoint to put themselves in a situation where they're going to be harmed by someone else. As one of my teachers has said, is like, we don't have to make ourselves a punching bag for someone else. However, is that in particular when it comes to the parents, that's a relationship that you want to have in the best possible way as possible. So like, for example, sometimes I've had situations where people will talk about how they have been abused by their parents, like physically abused in different ways. And so one of the things that we would say is that, in that particular case, yes, you may not be able to go and visit them physically, but to send them gifts, to send a message to a third party that you're asking about them, or if they're in a financial difficulty, that you send them money, and so on and so forth. So trying to be good to them in other ways, if talking to them directly is not necessarily going to be a healthy situation. Because yes, there are situations where it can be harmful, even in especially if parents may be emotionally abusive or verbally abusive, then it could be a situation of maybe sending gifts or sending messages to third parties or writing letters, things that don't require the verbal communication, but still show a sense of caring and concern and goodness towards them.
Thank you for your advice. Yes, I will do that.
May Allah make it easy for you. And really, I should have said this in the beginning, but the ultimate answer to any of our questions or any of our concerns is just asking Allah to make it easy. Because whatever, as it has been said before, whatever Allah, the one that brings you to it is the one that can get you through it. Meaning that every test that we may have in this life, Allah is the one that has brought us to that test, and so He's the one that can get us through it. And so one of the greatest things that we can do is that if we're able to get up in the middle of the night before Fajr, is to ask Allah then, because He's mentioned that that is a time when He answers our supplications.
You mean, are you talking about like something, there's a name for like Qiyam or something like that? Is that the Qiyam time? Wait, I'm going to take a look.
It's called tahajjud in Arabic. So tahajjud, it indicates that a person has prayed their Isha prayer and they've gone to sleep. And then they wake up before Fajr, and that is considered to be tahajjud. The other option is that, for example, a person could just stay up in the night, but that would be referred to as qiyam al-layl, the standing in the night. But essentially, it's that last third of the night. That is the time when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said that is the time that He looks for people to ask Him, and that is the time that He answers.
Okay. I think I was asking in the wrong time all the time, so He didn't answer me. So I stopped asking.
No, and the thing is that some people actually go through that as well. But the thing is that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu the Prophet sallallahu he mentioned that there's three ways that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually answers our du'as. And so one way is that He gives us what we ask for, the exact way that we ask for it, or the exact way that we're kind of expecting it. The second way is that He doesn't give us what we want, because He knows that it's actually going to be harmful for us if we were to have it. And then the third way that He may answer our dua is that He won't answer it in this life, but He will give us the answer or give us the benefit in the next life, which is the best possible outcome. But the second thing to always remember is that our supplications, they're not on our timeline. You know, because for many of us, like as far as we're concerned, like our supplications would have been answered yesterday. You know, especially in the world like we live in today, where we order something online, and we are expecting that we want to have it 5 minutes from now, and so on and so forth. And so we have to always remember is that just because our dua may not be answered the way that we want, or necessarily in the time that we want, is not to say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not answering our dua. It's just that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he does things based upon his knowledge and what he knows is ultimately best for us. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it a good relationship, and better the relationship between you and your parents. I mean, for example, Sidi Usama Cannon, who I was mentioning before, he went through a similar difficult situation between him and his parents, and it took years before the relationship was able to be healed. But it's a situation where we continue to strive. And so, yes, if verbally talking to your parents is not necessarily feasible, meaning that it's going to cause you harm, then at least try to see if maybe you can send gifts or an email or something like that to keep up the communication and to still try to show that goodness towards them. And may Allah make it easy for you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll let other people to ask questions. If other people have no question, I will continue.
Was there something in the chat that I have missed? I just want to make sure no one put anything in the chat that I missed. And if no one else has anything that they want to add, or
okay, I will continue. I wanted to discuss about how to deal with parents, if you don't mind. My parents, I was so hurt since I was a baby growing up. I never received any emotional support. My mom, she didn't even hug me like other toddler or babies hold me. Never like that. My dad is very scary figure. I never liked him since I was a baby. So I didn't have those closeness growing up. So that's why I have a lot of problem. Start from I was teenager until now. Now I'm just I try to heal myself. I read a lot of stuff. I read a lot of books. Also I do research online. So I figured out my parents are narcissists. So then I text my dad, told my dad what he did wrong, that I wish he never listened to me. My dad, he's the source of the problem of the entire family. Everybody have to listen to him. He would use the money to buy people for respect. Like, this is what I figured out now. But everything he taught me was wrong. So I learned everything my dad taught me, but I hate wars from school to work. I always view people as nice people until somebody did bad things to me, then I got hurt. So now I gradually understand the word. So I write to my dad to tell him what he did wrong. He refused to read. He refused to acknowledge my analysis. So then I refer books to him. I mail the books to him. He refused to read. And then I also send him video from YouTube. There was psychologists, they were talking about the same subject. They basically explained that my parents raising me wrong, but they refused to watch the video. And they gave me the reason, they gave me the reason, oh, they are old. Now they are both above 70. So they said, oh, we're too old. we're not going to change. So that's the solution. Like they just, I don't know how to deal with them, because whenever I talk to them, they just tell me about whoever is successful, whoever make more money, talk about, like they would omit who's not doing well. They would only talk about the friends or family members doing good. I feel our conversation is very shallow. I couldn't discuss anything with my parents. I'm always like this, you know. I feel very empty when I was growing up with my parents. I feel I would go crazy if I live in that household. So I'm very happy I live separated from them. Um, and recently they want to visit me. I haven't seen them for 5 years. So my heart is feel of guilty, shame. But I couldn't receive my parents because whenever they come, they would like my dad. He would like bully, like they both bully me. I'm not allowed to speak back. If I speak back, my dad he will play heart attack. Then my mom would tell me, "Oh, you should not make your dad angry." So growing up, I have to accept everything. I cannot speak back, so that make me have psychological problem because there was so now I learned to not accept my parents visit me. I don't want to go there either. So the situation is like this. It's very difficult because I'm worried about one day they will die. I have never done anything good for them. I did buy a lot of things. I bought a lot of clothes for them, a lot of stuff, but I couldn't mail to them. I mail like small things because the mailing is very expensive, an international package. Plus, they have to go to certain places to pay certain like custom. So my dad told me, forget about mailing me anything because it's not really cheaper, even for him or for me. Definitely for me, it's not cheap. Yeah, so that's the situation. I don't really know how to use a Muslim Islamic way to be good to the parents. I know I'm supposed to, because on the Quran says I have to be nice to my parents. Today that you just suggested me to mail gifts, but the problem is my parents, they don't want me to mail anything, and they are richer than me. Usually they give me money rather than I give them. So that's what it makes me feel very guilty because I cannot provide them anything. I want to provide them like understanding, so before they pass away, our relationship can be improved. But they don't really want to hear anything they did wrong. They are not interested in getting educated about anything. Yeah, that's I'm being a very I'm unlucky to be born in this family, to be honest. So that's what I feel.
Yeah, again, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for you and be able to rectify the relationship between you and your parents. It's a very difficult situation. Oftentimes, I will often say to people is that usually our biggest test that we will have in this world will usually always come from a family member. And that's pretty much across the board. I mean, I can't definitely, you don't say that it's always the case for any given situation, but many people that I've encountered, their biggest trials, their biggest tests, they come from family members who are supposed to be close to them. And it becomes a very difficult situation of, because Islam emphasizes having good relationships with family members. And this is actually why the Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned that the aspect of having good family ties is not that we keep up the ties with those who are good to us in regards to our family, but rather that we keep up ties even with those who cut off ties with us. And so that's a very difficult situation because oftentimes it becomes just easier just to say, you know what, I'm just not going to deal with them just because it's so hard to deal with them. But the Prophet ﷺ, he's let us know is that the way to greater excellence and having a more pleasing situation with God is to try to maintain as much of a healthy relationship with our family as possible. So again, the basis is that we never put ourselves in harm's way. We don't put ourselves in a situation where they can actually cause us harm. However, that to whatever extent that we can show goodness towards them, that is what we do. And part of the reason, part of it is just that it didn't necessarily fully come to my mind to do so. But also, the other aspect of it is that I wouldn't have recommended it in the first place. Is that one of the things is that one of the most difficult things to do is for a child to give advice to their parents. Now, the thing is that I'm not calling you a child in that sense, but what I'm saying is that how many people here have children? Like, if people can raise their hand in the chat or something like that. Anyone in here have children? No one in here has
No,
children?
there's one person. Oh, yeah, there's one person has child.
No one in here has children? MashaAllah.
No,
I
there's
have 3 kids.
Oh, wait, who's that?
Sylvia.
Sylvia.
Sylvia. Oh, Sylvia, you have children. Okay.
3.
Sylvia, you have 3. Okay.
hmm
Sylvia, how old are your children?
9, 5, and almost 1.
Okay, 9, 5, and almost 1. So your children are basically still children. But
hmm
can you picture 20 years from now when all your children will be quote unquote grown? Is your view of them going to be any different? Or are they still going to be your children?
Those 3 my kids.
Yeah. I mean, I'm however old I am. I'm not going to necessarily say how old I am, but my mother will still sometimes call me her baby.
Yeah, I
You
tell
know,
my son he'll always be my baby.
yeah. So it's a mother thing. But the reason why I say that is that the part of the reason why it's so difficult for a child to give nasiha or give advice to their parents is because the parent is looking at their child from that lens. The parent is looking at the child as like, I'm the one that raised you. Like, I'm the one that tells you how the world works and what should be correct and what is not, and so on and so forth. So it becomes a barrier. So it's like you can give them all the good advice in the world, but oftentimes when it comes between a parent and when it comes from a child to a parent, it's just that no matter how it's presented, it's just not going to be, kind of taken in. And part of it is because of that relationship, is that the parent is, generally speaking, looking from a superior perspective. And then when you add culture to that, different cultures, they have different aspects of the parent-child relationship. So sometimes the cultural aspect can also be an additional barrier. Whereas like the culture like strongly emphasizes this aspect of like a child should never give their parents advice and so on and so forth. And so even in times where I may suggest that a person try to have advice given to their parents, oftentimes what I would say is that try to have someone that their parents respect, that is, their same age, be the ones to give them advice. Because again, coming from you as their child, it oftentimes it doesn't work as well. And so like, for example, I could say like, I wouldn't necessarily try to give my father advice. And it's just, I just know the relationship that we have. Like my father, he is definitely the patriarch of the family, and like whatever terms that, whatever kind of definition you want to give to that, my father, he's not necessarily going to readily take advice from me directly. And so oftentimes that is the case when it comes to parents. And so if there is a situation of trying to give advice, again, usually what I would recommend is the aspect of seeing if there's someone that they respect, particularly someone that they respect that is similar to them in age, that can be a means of giving them that advice. But in the meantime, it's just an aspect of, again, just trying to do as much goodness as you can, where at the same time, protecting oneself from harm. So if it truly is a situation where it's going to be a harmful situation, to physically be in the presence of one's parents, then you may limit any type of physical interactions, or it may be a situation where you only physically interact with your parents if there's a third party that is present. And the thing is that this is going to vary from person to person. So everyone's situation is unique. So depending on a person's particular situation, they would customize it for their particular situation. But again, there's still that aspect of, especially with the parents, of trying to be good with them to the extent possible, without, again, causing oneself harm in the process. And again, the lifeboat that we always have is the aspect of making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He makes easy our situation, and knowing that whatever difficulty that we may go through in this life, we will be overly compensated for it in the next life.
Yeah, talking about making dua, in this time that before Fajr, I'm sure like Palestinians under the bomb, like they do the dua all the time, but they still get bombed. How do you know that Allah going to answer?
So the thing is that for one, we know because the Prophet ﷺ has informed us of it. And so if we understand and we have that certainty in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then we have that certainty as well in His Prophet, then we know that what they inform us of is true. So that's why, we mentioned before, the Prophet ﷺ, he informed us that du'as are answered in one of three ways. And one of those ways, or should I say 2 out of the 3, are not that we get what we ask for directly. But also, like we mentioned before, is that the dua that we may make, it may not be answered immediately when we make it. It could be that dua is not going to be answered until generations down the line. So for example, in the 18th chapter of the Quran, which is Surah Al-Kahf, when Moses is interacting with Khidr, when he's interacting with Khidr, one of the things that happens is that Khidr builds a wall in a town where the people had treated them badly. And so Khidr explains to Moses that the reason why he built that wall is because there were 2 orphans in that town who their father had buried a treasure for them, and he built that wall so that the treasure would remain hidden until those children reached of age so that they can claim the treasure for themselves. And so what some of the scholars of Quranic exegesis, of Quranic explanation, have explained is that they actually say that the father that Khidr was referring to was not even their direct father. Like it wasn't their direct biological father, but it was one of their grandfathers. That it was, a grandfather, like a great-great-grandfather that was being referred to, that he was a righteous man. And so this was something that this great-great-grandfather had, initiated in his time, and that wasn't being manifested until his great-great-grandchildren were being able to receive it. So again, that's another aspect, is that there are situations in which our dua may be answered, but it may be an answer that comes generations down the line.
But in this Quran that Moses was told of this answered dua, but in our generation, whatever happened, nobody going to explain to us because we don't have Moses. Oh no, I mean we don't have the other. I don't know what's the name of that.
So the thing is that yes, we may not be able to see the manifestations of it, but for example, it's like someone who plants a seed and they're 90 years old in our time. Are they ever going to, like, for example, they plant a apple tree seed. Are they ever necessarily going to see the fruits of that apple tree?
No.
More likely, no. However, we have certainty that eventually, as long as they planted it in proper places, so on and so forth. But we have certainty that eventually someone, and maybe be their great-great-grandchildren or whatever the case may be, will see the benefits and the fruits of that apple tree. But from the standpoint of making dua, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us that we can make dua to Him and He will take care of the situation. And the thing is that, as I mentioned before, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that one of the ways that Allah answers our dua is that He saves it up for us in the hereafter. And He says that that is the best way that a dua can be answered. And actually mentioned in, if I'm not mistaken, on the narration, it actually mentions that the person on the Day of Judgment, when he's going to stand in front of Allah, he'll see all of these things that are meant for him. And the person will be honest and they'll say, Ya Allah, I didn't do anything to, gain these things. Like, I didn't do anything such that I should have all these things that you're saying that you're giving me. And Allah will say to that person, this is the answer to the dua that you made at such and such a time. This is the answer to the dua that you made at this time. This is the answer to the dua that you made at this time. To the point that the person will actually say, Ya Allah, if only I was never answered a single dua in this life. Why? Because if your dua is answered in the next life, whatever you have there is going to last forever.
But
And
what
so,
But what if my dua is ask Allah to help me to better the relationship with my parents before they pass away or before I pass away? So if it's not answered, the next life, I'm not going to be their children. That's part of my dua too. I don't want to be my parents' children ever again.
So the thing is that it could be different situations. Like again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's the one, He knows ultimately the wisdom in everything that He allows to happen. But I could just give possible examples of what can be. It could be a situation that your dua is delayed such that your relationship with your parents will not be resolved until maybe 10, 15 years down the line. Or it could be a situation that right before they pass away, and I'm not, may Allah preserve your parents, but it could be that right before your parents pass away, unbeknownst to you, because of the means that you may have taken to try to still maintain a good relationship with them, that towards the end of the life, that they actually become Muslim, and you weren't even expecting it. Or it could be a situation that on the Day of Judgment, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will allow for your parents to be able to see the truthfulness and the goodness that you are trying to call them to. Or it could be a situation where, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He gives you a tremendous reward for the patience that you bore while trying to be good to your parents. So there are many different ways that it can be manifested. And so it's one of those things where we are encouraged to have a good opinion of Allah, and that when we make dua, is that He is going to answer it in a way that is going to be of the ultimate benefit for us. It's just that we don't have the means to be able to know what that way is.
Wow, I concluded that everything is about faith. So it's not be able to prove that definitely in this life. So I just hold on to the faith.
Yeah. So the thing is that the reality of this world is that, and this is why we mentioned that, or so I say this, the Prophet ﷺ and the scholars, they mentioned, is that the aspect of getting things in this life, especially in particular, like we make a dua and our duas answer exactly the way that we want it in this world, is that is really kind of like a temporary situation, because anything that we get in this world is only going to last but so long. That even if a person were to have like if I do this exercise with people sometimes, like I'll ask people, like, if everyone can right now think of a moment in life where you are your happiest, like just one moment where you can think where you just like extremely happy. Does everyone have that moment that they can think of? Anyone not have a moment like that? Okay, so everyone has that moment. Okay, now the mere fact that I said, think of that moment, can any of you bring that moment back?
No. Time passed.
Or can any of you kind of recreate that same situation so that you can have that feeling again?
No.
Anyone have a situation like that? Or like a moment that was very happy that they can recreate?
No.
Yeah. I know for me, most of my most happiest moments are like one of the things I could say, because my son is sitting right here, like one of my happiest moments was when my son was born. You know, particularly my oldest, my you know, as someone has said to me, it's like there's always something special about the firstborn. It's not that you love your other children any differently, but it's just like, you know, they're the first ones to bring you from one kind of stage of life to another. But the thing is that as much as I may want to relive that moment, I can't go back 10 years and just have to be born again and have that whole situation replay over. But why do I mention that? I mention that because even though that may have been a very happy moment, that's all it was. It was a moment. So that anything that we get in this life, you know, whatever good feeling or good situation or good event that we have, it's only going to last for a few moments. And then life is going to go on. And so this is why, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَلَآخِرَةُ خَيْرٌ لَكُم مِّنَ الْأُولَى. That's the akhirah, the next life is better for you than what comes before it. Because the reality of the akhirah, and it's very hard to conceive based upon how things are in this life, is that in the akhirah, in the next life, things only continuously get better. Like, you know, whatever good feeling that you have at one moment, in the next moment, the feeling is going to be even better. Like, for example, like one of the easiest examples that can be given is like, you know, anyone have like a favorite food or like a really delicious food that you've had before? No one's had good food?
All the time.
Okay, Sister Mina, you're the first one I've seen. Do you mind sharing what your, you know, that most delicious food that you had was?
I guess. Kind of embarrassed. These days I have I've been craving spicy Korean dish called tteokbokki, which is like rice cakes cooked in this gochujang sauce. And I usually crave it when I'm stressed out, which has been quite a few times recently. So yeah, so that's what I'm
No
thinking
clue what
about.
that is. I have no clue what that is. So, but just imagine that deliciousness in terms of the taste of that and that feeling that you have, because you said that, you know, it's usually like, it's like, it sounds like a comfort food for you. And so just imagine that that taste and that comfort that you get from that, that in every bite, that deliciousness and that comfort just increases. Like every bite gets even more delicious and every bite increases you in even more comfort. Like how great would that be?
That would be amazing. But it doesn't happen that way.
In this life, no.
Yeah,
Because in some situations, the bite actually just gets worse. Like, you know, you have
right?
that really good bites and then like you have another bite. It's like, ah, I didn't get everything all at once. And so, but the
Exactly.
aspect of paradise is that it's the complete opposite in that regard, meaning that everything is just only increasing. Everything that we experience only gets better. Like it never gets worse. And so this is the aspect is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He has not promised us that life is going to be easy, nor, as I like to say to my son sometimes, nor has He promised us that life is going to be fair. He hasn't promised us that we won't see atrocities. He hasn't promised us that we will have good people around us at all times. But what He has promised us is that if we go through these difficulties with patience and that we turn back to Him in all of our affairs, He will give us endless bliss that we can't even imagine. Because again, I can't imagine the concept of food that just gets better with every single bite and that I never get full and I never have stomach pains and I never have to worry about going to the bathroom and like it doesn't really, because in this life in this world, I experience all those other kind of negative aspects that come along with it. And so this is, part of like the aspect of how we tried to start looking at the world. I can actually give you a few lines of poetry that I actually mentioned to someone the other day. It's from Imam Haddad, who's considered to be one of the great Yemeni scholars. It's actually a poem that he wrote after the death of his wife. His wife had passed away, and as a reminder to himself, he had written some lines of poetry to help him kind of get through the difficulty of losing his wife. And so the poem is called Allah Ya Allah bi Nadra, oh Allah, just a gaze. And in this poem, he has a few lines that I've memorized, where he actually says, and he's talking about the life of this world. He's talking about the dunya, and he's basically he wrote the poem in kind of like an advice format, like he's giving himself advice, but he's also given other people advice through this poem. And so he says in that poem, he says, "Tafakkar fi fanaha." So he starts these lines by saying, reflect upon its ending nature, meaning that he's saying that, when we think about the dunya, think about remember the fact that everything in it is coming to an end. That no matter how good or how bad this life is, it's all going to be coming to an end. So he says, tafakkar fi fanaha wa fi kathrat inaha. And remember about all the difficulties that you will go through. And he says, katrat inaha, that all of the kathra means a lot. It comes from the same word as kathir. That all the many difficulties that you'll go through. Because as in the position that I'm in, and I was just saying this to a friend not too long ago, is that one of the things that Allah has allowed me to see is that everyone has problems. Everyone has difficulties. Like, I don't care how perfect you think someone's life is. I don't care how good you think everything is going for them. Everyone has difficulties that they're going through. And it's like, pretty much across the board. And so it's just that some people, the issues that they go through are more prevalent, meaning that it's easier for other people to see. Other people's issues are more hidden, but everyone is going through them, and they fluctuate. Sometimes it'll be great. Sometimes it'll be like, how am I going to get through this day? And so he's saying, like, remember, that. And then he says, وَفِي قَالَتْ غِنَاهَا, and also reflect upon the little precious things that are actually in this world. Like, for example, I remember reading an article where they had mentioned, and some of you probably heard me say this before, but they had mentioned that they actually have done research. And the research that they did was that it shows that people actually are more excited about the potential of receiving something than they are in actually receiving the thing itself. Meaning that, like, people get more excited about something being delivered to their house than they are than when they actually get that thing. And I remember when I had read the article, I was just like, ya Allah, like, what am I doing? Because I was thinking to myself, like, I've literally gotten things that I was all excited about coming. I was like, oh, this is going to be, great. When is it finally going to get here? I can't wait for it to get here. The thing gets here, I don't even open up the box. like the thing just sits, like, of course, the thing that really comes to my mind is a weight set that I had gotten. Like, this great bench press that I'm gonna have, and be able to use this, and so on and so forth. Yeah, then never even open the thing up. And so the thing is that Imam Haddad in this poem, he's mentioning, وَفِي قَالَتْ غِنَاهَا, like, reflect upon how many things are actually truly precious to us in this life. And so then he says what? He says, فَتُوبَ ثُمَّ تُوبَ لِمَنْ مِنْهَا تَحَظَّى وَطَلَّقْهَا وَفِي قَلَّةِ الرَّحْمَنِ وَفِي excuse me فَتُوبَ ثُمَّ تُوبَ لِمَنْ مِنْهَا تَحَظَّى وَطَلَّقْهَا وَفِي طَاعَةِ الرَّحْمَنِ الشَّمَّارِ. And so he says, so give glad tidings, and then again give glad tidings to the person who is wary of it, meaning who is wary of this worldly life. And who separates themselves from this worldly life And in the obedience of the most merciful, they roll up their sleeves. And so again, this aspect of knowing that, yes, we are going to be tested in many different ways. And oftentimes those tests are going to come from those who are closest to us, which are usually going to be family of some sort, or they can be close friends, or even just from people who we feel should have had our overarching concern at hand, but we feel that they did not. But at the end of the day, as long as we are still holding on to that rope with Allah, then we will have a better situation than we could even imagine. Because in paradise there is no grieving, there is no worries, there is no stress. So, for example, Sister Tahmina can eat her special rice cakes, not out of comfort, but just because she just wants them to keep getting more and more delicious. And and so this is why many of the early righteous, they were so able to be detached from this world, is because they just understood is that if I attach myself to this world and I put my heart into all these different things, that they're just going to disappoint me, because at bare minimum they're going to be separated from me at some point. And so it's not to say that we can't love things in this life, or that we can't have a special relationship with different things or different people in this life, but it is to say is that that should not be our ultimate concern, but our ultimate concern should be our relationship with Allah, because that is what lasts forever. Now, the thing is that, again, this is something that's easier said than done. And this is part of the whole aspect of trying to follow the prescriptions that Allah has given us, because all the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us are actually meant for us to come closer to Him, so that we can come more and more to this reality of understanding that our relationship with Allah is the most important. And so this is why even when people sometimes will say that, like I mentioned this in particular with people who may have abusive relationships with their parents, is that don't look at the aspect of being good to them from the perspective of do they deserve it or not. Because for one, and at the end of the day, how many of us really deserve any goodness to be shown to us, especially goodness from God to be shown to us? But rather, look at it from the standpoint as this is another form of ibadah that I'm doing for the sake of Allah. So yes, my parents may not deserve good treatment, or my parents may not deserve certain gifts, or whatever the case may be. But I'm not doing this out of whether they deserve it or not. I'm doing this because this is something my Lord has asked me for, and this will bring me closer to my Lord. So just like, for example, many of us, we don't necessarily like to get up before the sun comes up. Like, getting up for Fajr is oftentimes not an easy or preferred thing for many people. So why do Muslims do it? They do it why? Because I'm doing this for the sake of Allah. I'm getting up for Fajr. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded me to, and I want to have that close relationship with my Lord. And so sometimes I'll, suggest for people to also look at our relationships with others, particularly family members, from that same light, that I'm not doing this because I think that you deserve it. I'm not doing this because I even want to necessarily do it, but I'm doing this because I know that this is a means of me getting closer to my Lord. And this is a means for me to have even greater bliss in paradise. Because again, as the Prophet informed us, is that there's no difficulty, even to the pricking of a thorn in this life that we go through, except that it will be a means of forgiveness and a means of reward for us in the next life, as long as we respond to it in a way pleasing to Allah. And so again, it's easier said than done, especially when you're in the moment. But ultimately, this leads to what is to come that lasts forever. And sorry, I kind of went on a long-winded tangent.
Very good. That's a very good point. Yes, I'm determined that I have to do that for the sake of Allah. I have to build a good relationship with my parents. I just don't know how. So I'm going to make a dua like before Fajr. Things start from tonight.
Inshallah. May
And
Allah
also, I
subhanahu.
mentioned something that when you were talking about like eating the food taste better later on, everything that you say about like after death, afterlife, I just feel like Allah is the best salesperson in the world. Like if like view it as a sales, um, um, like yeah, because like he's basically selling us a dream. Like you don't know whether going to realize in this life or not. You just hopeful in afterlife. Sorry, I use this way. I don't know how to say that. But that's the feeling when you were selling. You were telling me the dream. I'm just thinking it's the best salesperson.
And the thing is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he knows the human being better than we know our own selves. And so that's why he appeals to us in the different ways that he knows. So the thing is that different people, they respond to different things in different ways. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he mentions reward because he knows that for many of us, that's going to be our motivating factor. Like, for example, my son who's doesn't want to be on YouTube, but he keeps getting into the camera. But in any case, like for example, my son, sometimes when we ask him to do something, he'll say, "What's the reward? What's the reward that I'm going to get? Is there a reward in it?" Why? Because that's what motivates him. And so that he is a part of that human archetype where some of us, we respond based upon reward. It's that, oh, if I do this, I'm going to get this, and that sounds great, so I'm going to do that. I don't necessarily want to do it, but if I'm going to get this reward, that's great. Then also Ta'ala will mention also punishment, because he knows that for some of us, we respond by punishment. Some of us were not as interested in terms of reward, but when we hear like if we don't do this or if we do this, then there's this punishment that we may receive. We're like, yeah, never mind. Like, I don't want to have that. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he knows the human being better than we know ourselves. And so this is why he uses that that method sometimes, is that in order to kind of entice us to do what he knows is ultimately best for us, he will mention to us about different rewards, or even possibly punishments, to spur in us the ability to do it. It's just like, for example, a person that goes to the gym, they may not, especially like, when talking about like a person who's like a real serious bodybuilder, is that anyone that knows anything about bodybuilding is that it's actually not a healthy life, and it's actually a hard, stressful life, because the strict diet that you have to take, the amount of exercises that you have to do, the amount of sacrifices that you have to make in terms of the food that you can't eat and the little bit that you are able to eat, and so on and so forth, and the repetitiveness of. So basically, it's like it's an undesirable way of being. But why do people do it? Why? Because they're looking ahead and saying that I want this result, that I'm making all these sacrifices and I'm doing all these things that I don't like because I want the reward of the way that my body is going to look at the end of this. And so it's similar in the standpoint of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is that he knows that some of us, we respond that way. So he mentions to us all of these benefits that we may have in the akhirah as a means of spurring us on when times get difficult. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he knows that we are going to have difficult times, and that he knows that the shaitan is going to try to get us to want to give up. And so in order to kind of keep us going, he mentions is that, look, if you go through this hardship now, which is ultimately going to be temporary, you're going to have things that you can't even imagine. Because he literally, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, is that he has in store for the people of paradise things that no ear has ever heard, no eye has ever seen, and no heart has even inclined to actually even wish for. Like, I don't even know what that is, because I know from my perspective, even if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala were to say, okay, Tariq, paradise will be the way that exactly how you want it to be. I could actually have a paradise from just my imagination that I would be perfectly happy being in, just by using my imagination of the things that I know of. So I can't even understand or really imagine what it means that there's things that my heart has not even considered that will be a reward in paradise. And so, but again, this helps us to get through those difficult times, because again, as Prophet said, it's not necessarily going to be easy. That people will look at Muslims as being strange, that it will not be easy to always hold on to the deen, to hold on to the religion. But for these difficulties that a person may go through, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to give you a reward that never ends. And even better, it only gets better. Like every moment in paradise only gets better. And that I don't know if there can be any greater recompense. And this is why, like, even for example, the situations that are going on in like Palestine and other places where people are going through suffering, like in the Sudan and in other places, is that for those people who died in a state of iman, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, he says, like, do not say about those who die in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meaning that they die unjustly in battle or the like, that they are dead. Do not say that they are dead, but ahya'um inda rabbihim, that they are alive with their Lord, even though you do not comprehend it. Because the people who have the highest rank in paradise are the anbiya wa siddiqeen the anbiya wa siddiqeen wa shuhada. That's the prophets, and then the siddiqeen, those who are truly sincere, meaning the most righteous people, and the shuhada, and those who die bearing for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That these are the people who have the highest status in paradise, and even the highest status in the intermediary realm, meaning the barzakh. And so, as some of our teachers have said, is that if you were to possibly ask some of the people who have been killed in, for example, like Gaza, who died with iman, if they would want to come back to this life, they will they will tell you, no, we don't. Like, what our Lord is recompensing us with, is even better than anything that we could have had in this world. And the thing is that that's hard for us to kind of fathom, because of what we see and the aspect that we're going to miss them, and that we can see their family members who have been left behind that no longer have them. But this is because we have the veil of this world in front of us, so we can't see the goodness that is to come in the akhirah. So for example, if and it's not necessarily going to always be the case, but like, just to kind of like put it into some type of example, it's like if you had a close relative who was going to be moving, and they were going to be moving to like a great big mansion in the best of communities, and they were going to have all the things that they ever wanted to be able to obtain, but they were going to be moving to another country. Would you be sad for them or happy for them? I'm asking. Would you be sad for them or happy for them? Did I lose everyone? No volunteers?
Happy, you'd be happy.
You'd be happy for them?
Yeah.
Now, the thing is that you might miss them, but you'd be happy for them because of all the benefits that they're going to have in this new country. And so this, so the thing is that at the end of the day, even though we don't necessarily like to think about it, like, the like as one poet would say, like, how do people extend to the mercy of the Lord except upon the wings of the angel of death? Is that like if I ask people, like, how many people want to go to paradise, you'll usually have everyone raise their hand. But then if I ask, okay, how many people want to die, then all the hands go down, or most of the hands go down. But it's like, how do you obtain paradise without dying first? And so the thing is, but at the end of the day, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, "Kullu nafsin da'ikatul maut," that every soul will taste death. So the thing is that even when a person dies, the ultimate reality is that we are all going to die. It's not a situation where, like, a person dies and like that's kind of like not going to be the case. Ultimately all of us are going to die. We are all walking towards our death ultimately. Some of us will die young, some of us will die in middle age, some will die old, so on and so forth. But the thing is that, again, from the standpoint of the Muslim, is that we understand that death of this life is only one stage of life. And in actuality, it's, comparatively speaking, it's a short stay of life. For example, for many people, the life that they'll have in the grave is going to be way longer than the life that they have in this world. And then the life that we'll have on the day of judgment, Yawm al-Qiyamah, is going to be exponentially longer than the life that we had in this world. And then in the aspect of, inshallah, God willing, being a person in paradise, that lasts forever. So the thing is that, like, the statement of saying, like, I would, like a person having a statement of like, I wish I was never born or something like that, that is something that we say that is not something that comes from the Islamic perspective. Because the thing is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He created you out of His wisdom. As it mentions in the Quran, مَا خَلَقْتَ هَذَا بَاطِلًا, that, oh Allah, you have not created this in vain. You have not created this in any type of falsehood. So there's a wisdom in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creating every single one of us. And the mere fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us to have Iman, that is saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ultimately wants forever goodness for you. And this is why, like one of my teachers, he mentions, is that you should do your best to always have as good of an opinion of other Muslims as possible, because you never know who are the closest people to Allah. Because every Muslim is a wali of Allah in some fashion. Even the disobedient Muslim, as long as he truly has Iman in their heart, is still a wali of Allah, in the sense that ultimately Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants for that person forever goodness. Why? Because even the disobedient Muslim will eventually be brought out of the hellfire and they will be placed into paradise forever. And so that means that ultimately Allah's ultimate want for a person, if He's blessed them with Iman, is that He wants for them
paradise,
to have ultimate bliss that lasts forever. And so, yes, the purpose of this life, unconditionally, is to worship Allah, is to be guided towards God, and then to spend our lives trying to worship Him in the way that He is pleased with. So how does one find their purpose in Islam? In Islam, does each person have the same purpose? Yes. So again, so the ultimate purpose is to worship God. However, if you're talking about like your purpose from the standpoint of like a dunyawi perspective, like, this worldly perspective, like, am I meant to be a scholar, or am I meant to be a doctor, or am I meant to be a social worker, and so on and so forth? The thing is that is just going to be based upon the different situations Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed in a person's life. So that's very much a subjective situation. And so what a person can do in terms of like trying to kind of figure that out, look at your life and see what blessings has Allah blessed me with. what things have what things has Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed me with that I can possibly benefit others through that for the sake of God, and then trying to go down that path. So for example, like even from the standpoint of like academia, I would tell anyone that like is trying to pursue like higher level academia, like if you're trying to pursue a master's or a doctorate degree, only do it in something that you actually have a passion for. Because if you don't have a passion for it, it just becomes miserable. Because you're going to be reading a whole bunch and writing a whole bunch about stuff that you don't care about. So like, see what Allah has blessed in you that, you incline towards, and how you can possibly utilize that to benefit his creation. And in that way, you can find, your purpose. Like I can give an example. There's a brother that we know. He's actually here in the Makunji area where I am. And he actually was of those who had converted to Islam. And then he went overseas to study Islamic studies to become an Islamic scholar. Because from his perspective, like, that is how you reach Allah. That is how you fulfill your purpose in this life, to dedicate your life to become an Islamic scholar. So in the process of him doing his studies, his teachers actually came to him and said that, look, we want you to pause your studies right now, and we want you to actually come and work with us in using your skills as in audio and visual. So the thing is that he had initially kind of resisted his teachers, like saying like, no, like I want to study. I thought that this was the path to finding Allah. And they had informed him is that your path in finding Allah, your path in becoming close to Allah, is going to be in assisting with your skills in audio visual. That your skill set is what is actually going to bring you closer to Allah. And so he started using his skill set with his teachers to produce different Islamic productions and so on and so forth. And he became very successful at that. And so the thing is that, it's not going to be like, just a path of being a scholar, or just the path of being a volunteer at your local masjid and so on and so forth. You can look at your life, see what Allah has blessed you with in terms of skill sets, see what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed you with in terms of things that bring you joy, things that give you motivation, and then trying to use that in a manner that can benefit the rest of creation. Was it free will that that a person is born as a human rather than an animal? As from the standpoint of us coming into existence, that was within the will and the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he has chosen to create us in the way that he's decided. And so that is from the irada of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That was his will, that he decided that he was going to create us as being human beings and not create us as being an animal or a plant or the like. And so that was in the realm of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That was not necessarily something that we chose in that regard. And Allah knows best. But even in the aspect of him creating us as human beings, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, he says, لَقَدْ كَرَمْنَا بَنِي Adam, that verily we have ennobled the children of Adam. So that even for the person that doesn't believe in God, that doesn't believe in Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying even for that person, he is still ennobled. That just a person being from the Bani Adam, from the children of Adam, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ennobled. So the human being is actually the best of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's creation. Meaning that the human being, if they were to follow the path of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that they can ultimately be even better than the angels. And so yes, a person can reach a station that is even higher than that of the angels. How to remain steadfast? Is that the question? How to remain steadfast? So the aspect of trying to remain steadfast, one is if a person can, and again, it's not as easy, but if a person can, to have good company. And in our times, that could be physical, which is always better. Like, anything that you can do in live in person is always better. But even virtually, that is another a means, is to have good company. And because it's kind of like going to the gym or working out, is that if you have a partner to do it with you, then it makes it easier, because you have someone to spot you and then also to motivate you in those times when you may not have as much motivation. The other aspect is that you take things bit by bit. So still kind of using the gym type of model, is that if a person that's used to going to the gym, one of the things that you learn if you learn the proper etiquette of going to the gym is that whenever you're doing an exercise and a certain weight becomes easy for you, you don't like just throw 10 pounds on each side, after that and try to lift that. But rather, what do? You only put 2.5 pounds on each side. So you're only adding 5 pounds altogether. So meaning that you go in increments. So the thing is that part of the aspect of being steadfast is that you want to do things consistently. And so the aspect of consistency is that you don't try to take on a whole bunch all at once, but rather you build yourself up. So you start out with something that you're capable of doing. So just like if your person goes to a gym, you don't try to put on 180 pounds right at the beginning, especially if you've never gone to the gym at all. So what do you start out with? For some people, you might just start out with the bar, and just get used to lifting the bar. Like, okay, here we go. Like, I'm doing this bar. It's just me and the bar. And once that becomes consistent, once that becomes easy, you're doing that on a regular basis, then, okay, now I might add 5 pounds. And so when I add that 5 pounds, that might be a little bit more difficult, but still getting to a point where I'm consistent with that. And then I just build up incrementally. So similarly, in our relationship with Allah and trying to be steadfast, is that we start out with what we can handle. So this is why usually with people who are either recommitting to Islam or who have reverted to Islam or converted, whichever term you want to use, is that, I usually will say, just start out with the prayer. Like, don't worry about trying to learn all these different other aspects and trying to implement all these different other things. Like, kind of make your primary focus the prayer and then build upon that. Once the prayer becomes easy, like once that becomes a strong basis, you have you have a situation where it's like, missing the prayer is kind of like something that just doesn't happen, then go on to the next thing. So it may be, for some people, it may be that I might start fasting on optional days, or it could be that I'm just going to increase in my prayers. So now I'm going to add on the duha prayer, for example, or I'm going to add on the Salatul Awabin, the 6 rakas of optional prayer after Maghrib, or whatever the case may be. But again, incremental. And so having good company, going in incremental steps, and then the head of everything, making dua, asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep you firm upon the path. The Prophet ﷺ, he used to have a dua that he used to say, Ya muqallib al-qulub, thabbit qulubana ala dinik. O changer of the heart, keep our hearts firm upon your deen, upon your religion. There was a question on schools of thought by, so I need like a long video, some reading on it. So this, we actually, at one point, I did a whole seminar on the schools of thought. I've actually done it more than once, actually. But if I'm not mistaken, one time with the Mecca Center, we did a seminar on the schools of thought, I believe. But in any case, the schools of thought, just kind of briefly, because again, we could take a whole seminar in that. The schools of thought, they represent the simplified way of being able to live out the religion without having to become your own individual scholar. Like, so for example, Sister Sylvia, I believe, was the one that had answered. Like, Sister Sylvia, do you want to become an Islamic scholar?
No, nothing. I want to like learn, have foundation, but I'm interested in other things.
Yeah. So the thing is that your situation is probably the situation of like 95% of Muslims. Is that most people, they're not interested necessarily to become an Islamic scholar, but they want to know what it is that they need to know to be able to arrive to Allah safely. And so the schools of thought, essentially, that's what they're there for. It's for the average Muslim to be able to learn their basics in a systematic way. And the reason why we have the schools of thought is because there are certain things within the religion that are subject to interpretation. And so I can, okay. So you're talking about what we discussed earlier today in terms of like my suggestion, like a person that has a dog, possibly adhering to the Maliki school. So again, that is based upon the aspect of ease for people. So the thing is that if I were to tell you, for example, in the Shafi school, so I'll try to do this as quickly as possible. Please forgive me if we go over time. If people have to leave, please feel free. But for example, there's a hadith of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ that's narrated in the Sunan of Abi Dawud. And it's considered to be an authentic hadith. I believe the grade might be Hasan. So that means that it's considered to be a sound hadith. In which the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he says that let any one of you who has a dog lick their bowl, wash it 7 times, once with earth. So that is a statement of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. What does that mean? And so the thing is that the scholars, they have looked at this particular hadith and they've come to different conclusions. Some scholars, they looked at it and they took it very literally. And they said that essentially this is indicative that anytime that a person has wet contact with a dog, then they need to wash that area 7 times, once with earth. Other scholars had looked at it from the standpoint of recommendation, that they looked at it from the standpoint that this is the most ideal way of cleaning oneself from a dog, but this is not a required way. So the reason why I had mentioned earlier that a person that has a dog it would be easier for them to possibly follow the Maliki school, because in the Maliki school, they hold that the interpretation of this hadith is the latter, that it's a recommendation, but it's not a requirement. And that even if they didn't wash themselves at all, they would still be pure when they go to pray. And so that is, why I mentioned it, because other schools of law, pretty much all the other schools of law, would say that dogs would be impure, such that you would have to clean yourself before going to pray if you came into particularly wet contact, or for example, if you had their hairs stuck to your clothing. And so the thing is that it's kind of hard to kind of like do a full out comparison between the 4 schools. It's just like with the issue of dogs, it's a little bit easier in regards to like what would be kind of more practical. The thing I can say is that in the Maliki school, in regards to some of the intricacies in terms of, because primarily it's going to be the issue about the prayer, is that it's just a situation that if a person is going to use the Maliki position in regards to that, is that when they make wudu, they just want to make sure that they are rubbing all their limbs when they wash them, that making sure that they rub their limbs, making sure that they're making their wudu in one fluid session, meaning that there's not long breaks in between their making of wudu. And also when they make ghusl, to make sure that they're rubbing the entirety of the body, meaning that they're actually rubbing the body. And that when they pray the prayer, that they do not recite the Bismillah in the prayer, that they would only recite from Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. These are some of the more major issues that the Maliki school holds to be the proper way of purification, as well as the prayer itself. And again, I just mentioned the Maliki school in terms of situational aspects, because again, the other schools will say that if there was wet contact or if there was hair, that they would that the person would need to purify themselves. Now, there was one other question in regards to encouragement in terms of dogs or cats. So the thing is that Islam doesn't necessarily encourage or discourage the ownership of animals per se, but it is to say that cats are not treated in the same way as dogs in terms of tahara, in terms of purification. So cats themselves are not impure in and of themselves, whereas dogs, according to many scholars, would be considered to be impure in and of themselves. So it would be a situation where there's not going to be necessarily an issue if a Muslim were to have a cat in the home. However, it's not necessarily recommended for a Muslim to have a dog in the home. There are some exceptions. So for example, if a person has a seeing eye dog or some type of assisting dog that needs to be kept in the home, then that's a different situation. Or if it's a situation where a person is using the dog for some other type of need, like for security or for hunting or the things of that nature, then it'll be recommended for the person to keep the dog outside in a suitable facility outside. But that's a whole nother discussion that maybe we can lead off with at our next Living Islam gathering, inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for us all. So inshallah, our next Living Islam will tentatively be February 15th. For some reason, it seems like something's going to be happening on that day, but if there is a change in the date, inshallah, we will let you know. But tentatively for right now, we're going to say that the next Living Islam will be February 15th, inshallah. And so may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive me for the mistakes that I may have made, or anything incorrect that I may have said. That is only from the weakness of my own self. And if there was anything that was of benefit, then that is only from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And He is the one that is deserving of all praise. So inshallah, we will leave you all in Allah's care, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make easy your affairs, and may He grant you goodness in this life and the next. And if we do not see each other in this life, then may He allow for us all to be united in the best of lives in the akhirah by His mercy. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. الله سبحانه وتعالى أعلم وهو اسمنا ونعم الوكيل. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.